You've been underestimated, you've been lied to, you've been manipulated, maybe not just once, but over and over again. But the moment you grew stronger, clearer, and unshakable, they had to switch tactics. Because once they can't manipulate you, they use something even dirtier. They try to shame you. They'll say, you've changed, you think you're better than us, you're cold now, you're selfish. They try to make your strength look like a flaw. They'll act like your boundaries are a betrayal. This is the last-ditch effort of people who no longer have control over your mind, so they try to control your emotions. They'll try guilt. They'll try exclusion. They'll twist your image. Why? Because they couldn't control you anymore. And the hardest pill for a manipulator to swallow is your freedom. But listen closely. It's not your job to stay small so others can feel comfortable. It's not your duty to keep saying yes when your soul screams no. You owe no explanation for protecting your peace, raising your standards, or walking away from fake loyalty. Let them talk, let them twist, let them misunderstand. That's the price of self-respect, and it's worth every ounce. See, real strength doesn't mean being loud or aggressive. Real strength is staying grounded when lies are flying, when whispers are spreading, and when old connections turn cold. They couldn't control you with charm, so now they'll try to control you with shame. Don't fall for it. You are not cold. You've just learned who deserves your warmth. You are not arrogant. You've just stopped begging for crumbs of validation. And you're not difficult, you just finally know your worth. Keep walking, keep building, keep healing. The truth doesn't need defending, it just needs time. And in time, the same people who once tried to break you will have no choice but to respect you. They tried to control the version of you who didn't know better, but this version is untouchable. If they can't manipulate you, they'll try to shame you. But when you refuse to break, you win. When someone who thrives on manipulation realizes they can no longer control you, they don't just walk away. No, manipulators don't give up quietly. When control no longer works, when the charm, the pressure, the guilt trips, the fake concern, the fake praise, and the emotional dependency tactics fail, they go to something darker. They reach into a dirtier bag of tricks, and the tool they pull out is shame. Because shame doesn't come from facts. It doesn't rely on truth. Shame is emotional smoke. It's designed to confuse you, make you question yourself, and drive you back into their grip without them having to touch you. Shame whispers in your ear that you're the problem, that you've changed, that you're cold now, that you're not as kind, not as loving, not as good as you once were. But the truth is you're just no longer easy to manipulate. That's when they start using your growth against you. They say things like you've become so full of yourself, or you used to be humble. They'll say you're so distant now. But the real issue isn't that you've grown cold, it's that you've grown wise. You're no longer feeding into the drama. You're no longer seeking their approval. And that's what eats them alive. You're no longer predictable. You don't jump when they poke. You don't apologize when you haven't done anything wrong. That's power they can't stand to see in your hands. So they try to make you feel guilty. Guilt is one of the most effective tools a manipulator can use when control slips away. They'll remind you of everything they've done for you, inflate the times they helped you, and downplay the moments they hurt you. They'll act like a victim. Suddenly, they're the one who's suffering because you set a boundary. Suddenly, they're the ones confused and heartbroken because you won't engage in the same dysfunctional dance anymore. They twist your clarity into cruelty and your silence into selfishness. And here's what makes it so powerful. If you're a person with a conscience, if you care deeply, if you've always been sensitive to the emotions of others, then shame hits you right in the heart. It makes you second guess yourself. You start asking, am I being too harsh? Am I really the villain here? Have I become everything they're accusing me of? That self-doubt is what they feed on. They hope you'll feel so uncomfortable in your new strength that you'll return to the old pliable version of yourself, the one who tolerated the disrespect, made excuses for their behavior, and kept the peace at your own expense. But make no mistake, This isn't about you being wrong. It's about you being out of reach. They don't want you to have autonomy. They want access. And if manipulation can't get them access, then shame is their next weapon. Because shame is sneaky. It doesn't yell, it doesn't demand, it suggests, it hints, it nudges you back into submission using your own empathy against you. That's why they'll never say outright, I want you to let me use you again. Instead, they'll say, I miss the old you. That statement isn't about nostalgia. It's a calculated move. The old you wasn't more lovable. The old you was more controllable. And that's what they want back. So when the manipulation fails and you see their tactics fall flat, be prepared, the dirty trick is coming. The guilt trip, the shame storm, the false narrative, and you'll need to hold your ground, because they're not fighting for the relationship, they're fighting for control. And when you recognize that, you finally understand what real freedom costs and why it's always worth it. Strength is often mistaken for selfishness by those who once benefited from your weakness. The moment you begin to stand firm in your convictions, the moment you say no without explanation, the moment you prioritize your peace over their comfort, you become the enemy in their story. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you've stopped doing what they expected of you. You've stopped bending, stopped breaking, stopped apologizing, for simply existing with your own needs, thoughts, and voice, and that threatens the dynamic they relied on. People who are used to your compliance don't know what to do when you start showing up differently, when you begin to value your time, your energy, and your standards. They call it arrogance. They say you've become cold, distant, or full of yourself. But what they're really saying is you're no longer easy to control. What they miss is that this strength you now carry wasn't given to you, it was earned. You bled for this strength, you cried for it. You grew through betrayal, disappointment, and long nights of questioning your worth. And now that you've found your footing, they can't handle the fact that your steps no longer tiptoe around their feelings. There's a narrative that says if you're strong, you must be unkind. If you're firm, you must be harsh. If you're direct, you must be cold. But strength isn't cruelty. Strength is clarity. It's knowing who you are, what you will and won't accept, and having the courage to walk away from anything that violates that. It's refusing to stay in situations where your kindness is mistaken for weakness and your silence is mistaken for consent. But the moment you operate from this kind of clarity, people who once benefited from your confusion begin to label you as difficult. It's easier for people to call you selfish than to admit they were taking advantage. It's more convenient to criticize your boundaries than to reflect on their own behavior. When you stop being available at their convenience, when you no longer sacrifice your peace to make them feel secure, they paint you as the villain. And that's how society often reacts to strength, especially when it's quiet, calm, and unapologetic. We are taught to associate self-sacrifice with love and to associate self-respect with ego. But real love, real connection, and real integrity require mutual respect, not silent compliance. When you choose to grow, to evolve, to step into your power, it disrupts the relationships that were built on the old version of you, the one who said yes to things you hated, who overextended to avoid conflict, who stayed small so others could feel big. And when that version dies, some people don't mourn. It makes them angry because your strength reminds them of everything they've avoided in themselves. It forces them to look at their own choices, their own lack of boundaries, their own fears, and not everyone is ready to face that. So instead of celebrating your growth, they condemn it. Instead of matching your energy, they call you selfish for having it. But what they refuse to acknowledge is that your strength isn't about putting others down, it's about lifting yourself up. It's not about control, it's about liberation. You've learned that being everything to everyone is the fastest way to lose yourself. And now that you've chosen to honor who you are, the people who only knew how to relate to your insecurity start to drift. That's not selfishness, it's self-preservation. And there's nothing wrong with protecting your peace, even if it makes others uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, the people who truly value you won't be intimidated by your strength, they'll be inspired by it. Shame is a weapon of the weak because it doesn't require truth, strength, or integrity to use. It only requires a willingness to wound someone without taking direct responsibility for the damage. It's the coward's method of control, a backdoor into your emotions when the front door of manipulation has been slammed shut. Shame is used when a person doesn't have the courage to face you with honesty, so they choose to undermine your confidence instead. They can't force you to do what they want anymore, so they attempt to make you feel bad for wanting something different, for growing, for changing, for having boundaries. Shame is subtle. It wears a mask. It hides behind sarcasm, behind passive-aggressive comments, behind sighs and sideways glances and loaded silence. It makes you question yourself without ever giving you a clear accusation. It poisons your sense of self without a single open confrontation. That's what makes it such a dangerous weapon. It's quiet, but it cuts deep. It makes you feel small, not by force, but by suggestion. A manipulator doesn't have to yell at you to shame you. All they have to do is imply that your choices are selfish, that your success makes others feel left out, that your independence is abandonment. And if you're not grounded in your identity, those suggestions start to feel like truth. People who use shame as a tool are not operating from power, they're operating from fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being exposed, fear of being seen for who they really are when they can no longer mold others into roles that serve them. When they realize they can't dominate you through charm or coercion, shame becomes their last resort. It's not about you doing wrong, it's about them feeling weak. Instead of facing their own limitations, they try to drag you down to their level. They try to make you feel guilty for doing what they're too afraid to do. Live freely, honestly, and on your own terms. Shame is also contagious. It spreads when people aren't self-aware. Someone shames you, and if you're not solid in your worth, you pass that shame on to someone else. You shrink a little, you apologize for being yourself, you try to please people who are never going to respect you anyway. That's how shame works. It doesn't just attack one person, it changes how that person moves through the world. It makes you second-guess your intuition, your dreams, your voice. And that's exactly what the person using shame wants. Not your cooperation, but your hesitation. Not your agreement, but your confusion. What they hate the most is your clarity. Because when you see shame for what it is, a tactic, a trick, a psychological weapon, it loses its power. When you recognize that the person trying to guilt you is doing it because they have no other way to keep you close, you begin to understand how weak they really are. Not weak in the sense of being helpless, but weak in character, in courage, in truth. It takes strength to face someone and be honest. It takes strength to accept when someone outgrows your influence. But shame avoids all of that. Shame lets someone feel superior without ever having to admit their flaws. And when you stop reacting to it, when you stop explaining yourself to people who never cared to understand you, that's when the weapon fails. We use shame because they fear your strength, because your confidence, your independence, your refusal to submit reminds them of their own failure to rise. And rather than doing the work to grow themselves, they try to shrink you. But once you see shame as the desperate move it is, you stop letting it define you. You stop playing small for people who never deserved your light in the first place. You're not cold, you're clear, and there's a huge difference between the two. One comes from indifference, the other from understanding. Clarity doesn't mean you don't care, it means you finally see things for what they are. You've stopped romanticizing patterns that hurt you. You've stopped giving endless chances to people who only show up when it's convenient. You've stopped confusing chaos for love and drama for passion, and that doesn't make you cold, it makes you awake. The problem is, once you reach that level of clarity, the people around you who are still living in confusion will mislabel you. They'll say you've changed, and they'll be right, but not in the way they think. You didn't become bitter, you became wise. You didn't lose your warmth, you learned to protect it. You didn't harden your heart, you just stopped handing it to people who only knew how to bruise it. That's not coldness, that's self-respect. Right. And it makes people uncomfortable, especially those who were used to you saying yes when you wanted to say no. Clarity looks like silence where you once would have argued. It looks like distance where you once would have chased. It looks like boundaries instead of explanations. It looks like letting people misunderstand you rather than exhausting yourself trying to prove your intentions. This kind of clarity is often mistaken for being aloof or uncaring, but what's really happening is you've stopped playing roles in other people's narratives. You've stopped participating in conversations where your voice is only welcome if it agrees. You've stepped out of the performance and into authenticity. And for people who benefited from the performance, that feels like abandonment. When you were unclear, you over-explained, you made excuses for others, you justified mistreatment, you doubted your instincts, you tried to be palatable, agreeable, and safe for everyone. But clarity doesn't allow for that anymore. Clarity demands you be honest with yourself, even when that honesty leads to uncomfortable decisions. It demands that you walk away from things that drain you, even if they once made you feel alive. It demands you stop waiting for potential and start accepting reality. And that's what they can't handle, not your distance, but your discernment. They say you've become distant, but what's really happened is you've become selective. You've stopped watering relationships that never poured anything back into you. You've stopped over-investing in people who were only ever emotionally bankrupt. You've stopped explaining your worth to those committed to misunderstanding it. And because you no longer react the way you used to, because you no longer play the emotional games, they assume you've grown cold. But clarity isn't apathy, it's power. It's knowing what you want and what you won't tolerate. It's the ability to sit with discomfort without letting it drag you back into dysfunction. Being clear means you don't chase what's not aligned. It means you allow people to walk away without begging them to stay. It means you don't try to fix everything, especially not people who benefit from staying broken. That's not heartlessness, that's healing. That's wisdom earned through pain. That's strength forged in silence and solitude. You're not cold. You're not cruel. You're not detached. You are just done pretending that confusion is compassion, that sacrifice is love, and that suffering is noble. You've chosen to live in truth, even when that truth costs you people, places, and patterns that once defined you. And the ones who can't see that, they are only ever looking for someone to control, not someone to connect with. Clarity isn't the absence of feeling. It's the presence of self. It's the peace that comes from no longer needing to be everything for everyone. And if that peace feels cold to some, let it. You didn't come this far to keep losing yourself to make others feel comfortable. You came this far to finally see clearly and act accordingly. Respect comes after resistance, not before. It's rarely handed out freely. It's earned the moment you stop folding to pressure, stop agreeing just to keep the peace, and stop living under someone else's idea of who you should be. The uncomfortable truth is that many people won't respect you until you prove you're willing to stand without their approval. As long as you comply, as long as you bend, as long as you agree to be small so they can feel big, they might tolerate you, they might even like you, but they won't truly respect you. Respect is born the moment you draw a line. It comes when you say no and mean it. When you walk away from things that no longer serve you, even if they once made you feel needed. When you stop explaining yourself to people who were never listening in the first place. That's when people start to realize you're not here to be liked. You're here to live aligned. And alignment scares people who are used to you living out of obligation. The resistance you face when you start standing up for yourself isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's proof that you're doing something different. People resist what they can no longer control. They resist your clarity, your independence, your silence, your boundaries. But that resistance is the friction that sharpens your identity. It's how you discover who you are without the noise of people pleasing, where you find the strength to stop chasing validation and start honoring your truth. Most people won't respect your boundaries at first. They'll test them, they'll push back, they'll guilt you, shame you, question you, not because they're evil, but because they're used to the old version of you, the version that said yes when it wanted to say no, the version that sacrificed its own well-being to keep others happy. But the moment you shift, everything shifts. And not everyone can handle the new you. Respect doesn't come when you try to please everyone. It comes when you stop needing to. when you finally realize that shrinking yourself never protected you from judgment, it only kept you trapped in relationships built on conditions. You learn that being liked is not the same as being valued. Being accepted is not the same as being respected. You can be surrounded by people who like you and still feel invisible. Because without resistance, there's no clarity, and without clarity, there's no respect. You earn respect by choosing yourself when it's unpopular, by speaking up when silence would have been easier, by saying, this is who I am and this is what I need, even if it disappoints others. And you do it without anger, without drama, just truth. Over time, the same people who resisted your change will either rise to meet you or fall away. And either outcome is a gift. Those who stay will stay with deeper understanding. Those who leave would leave space for those who truly see you. Some people only understand respect through resistance. It's unfortunate, but real. They don't hear you until you stop being available. They don't see your value until you remove it. They don't appreciate your loyalty until you give it conditions. It's in your refusal to bend that they finally recognize your backbone. Not because you forced them, but because you finally stopped forcing yourself. So when resistance shows up, don't back down. Don't interpret the pushback as failure. It's actually a filter. It separates the ones who only wanted access from the ones who want connection. It shows you who can handle your truth and who only wanted your silence. And when you stay the course, grounded in who you are, something powerful happens. Even those who once misunderstood you are forced to admit, if only to themselves, that they respect you now. Not because you changed for them, but because you changed in spite of them. Freedom is the ultimate power because it cannot be taken from someone who has claimed it within. It's not just the absence of control, it's the presence of self. It's knowing who you are, what you want, and having the strength to walk away from anything that doesn't align with that. Real freedom is not loud, it's not reckless, it's calm, it's quiet. It's the unshakable confidence that comes from no longer needing permission to be yourself. When you stop seeking validation from people, when you stop trying to fit into boxes built by others, you realize, done, how powerful you really are. You stop living to meet expectations and start living to fulfill purpose. Freedom looks like being able to say no without guilt and yes without fear. It means not being afraid to disappoint people who never really saw you in the first place. It means you don't need to perform or pretend or edit who you are to make someone else feel comfortable. That's power, because once you're free from needing approval, you become unshakable. You stop chasing things that drain you and start attracting things that align with who you truly are. Most of the world is stuck in invisible cages made of fear, of people pleasing, of tradition, of this is how it's always been. And it takes real courage to break out of those. It takes courage to say, I won't live a life that looks good on the outside but kills me on the inside. It takes courage to be misunderstood, because freedom comes with a cost. People won't always get it. They'll call you selfish for choosing peace. They'll call you arrogant for choosing truth. But what they're really reacting to is their own lack of freedom. When you're free, you don't need to control others. You don't need to manipulate, beg, or force anything. You understand that anything real doesn't require fear to sustain it. You stop arguing with people who don't want to understand you. You stop explaining your worth. You stop over-giving in hopes of being chosen, because you realize when you're free, you already are enough. There's nothing more powerful than someone who's no longer afraid to walk alone if it means walking in truth. A freedom also brings clarity. When you're free, you can see what's real. What's performative. You see who loves you for you and who loves the version of you they can control. You see which relationships are rooted in truth and which are built on convenience. And with that clarity, you start to let go, not with bitterness, but with peace. Because when you're free, you don't hold on out of fear. You release out of love. Love for yourself, love for your growth, love for the life you know you deserve. And here's the thing about freedom. Once you taste it, you can't go back. You might try to return to the old roles, the old habits, the old comfort zones, that they won't fit anymore. They'll feel too small, too scripted, too fake. Because once you've lived in truth, anything less becomes unbearable. You'd rather walk alone in honesty than be surrounded in illusion. That's the power of freedom. It changes how you move, how you speak, how you love. You no longer show up out of duty, you show up from overflow. You don't stay in places where you have to shrink. You stay where you can expand. And because of that, everything in your life begins to shift. The people, the opportunities, the energy. It all begins to match your new standard, not because you forced it, but because freedom attracts what fear repels. Freedom is the ultimate power because it means you are no longer living a life that isn't yours. And when you live from that place, truly free, you become unstoppable. Not because you're louder than others, but because you're more honest than ever before. So the next time someone tries to twist your words, guilt trip your boundaries, or paint your growth as betrayal, remember this: it's not a reflection of your character. It's a reaction to your strength. You're not hard to love, you're just hard to control. And the moment they realize they can't bend you, they'll try to break you with shame. But don't flinch, don't shrink, don't explain, stand firm, because once you stop falling for their games, you rise into your power, and that's a freedom they'll never be able to take from you.